Okay, Adam, we are good to go. Yeah. Wait, I can't hear it.
Better take myself up. Right. Well, welcome. If you were at the morning's roller session, welcome back. And if you're back from yesterday from the Chris Peterson session, welcome back. And if this is your first time, welcome to our 2020 virtual wheelchair track camp. We're real excited today for this session to be talking a little bit about nutrition, and we have an incredible resource in Susannah Scaroni, one of my athletes, and has been training here at the University of Illinois for a number of years. And she's going to tell you a little bit more about her credentials. But she's two-time Paralympian, multi-time podium finisher at most major marathons, and has had a really outstanding career. And is also an incredible nutritionist, and is here at the nutrition science program pursuing her PhD, and has also had the opportunity to work with someone who I consider to be the world's top nutritionist, and that's Liz Broad, and who has mentored Susannah. And so we've been fortunate to have her as a resource. One point, and the reason that we highlighted nutrition this week is because it's such a critical element to the success of the athlete. Oftentimes, certainly it's happened with some of my younger athletes who've figured out the training part of being successful, but when practice is over, then things shut off, and they're not yet tuned in to the fact that it's a 24-hour intention of effort, and so nutrition and recovery and rest and sleep are so critical. And that certainly when the athletes figured out these elements, things start to move in the right direction, and generally with great haste too. So Susannah, I will give the floor to you, and attendees, as you have questions, pop those up, and I'm going to moderate, and I will interject with questions as it seems appropriate to. And so please take advantage of this resource. And Susannah, it's all yours.
Excellent. Thanks, Adam. Hopefully everybody can hear me. All right. If you can't, definitely let us know. But all right. Let me just get my screen up. Can you see that? Okay. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for jumping into our camp. Like Adam said, training and becoming the best wheelchair racer that you can be definitely is an all-day process. So one of those areas that we get to focus on now, especially after you had that nice workout just ahead of just a little bit ago with Brian, is what you can think about, immediately after that and throughout the day, so that you can make the most of those very tough roller workouts and get as fast as possible. So let's see. All right, Adam sort of mentioned this. I just have a slide a little bit about me, mostly to show that, we have this brilliant mastermind giving us our workouts. And then when you want to move a step ahead of that, or support it to the best of your abilities, you can utilize some other tools in your toolbox, like nutrition, recovery, sleep. And today we're going to talk about those so that you can meet your goals. Like mostly on this slide, I have to show you that I've met a lot of my goals throughout being a wheelchair racer. And I have many more, but it's been successful, and I really am thankful for my knowledge about nutrition and the ability just to get better and better and better at it. It's taken me about 8 years here of studying nutrition. As Adam mentioned, I'm still in graduate school learning more and more about it. And so like wheelchair racing, it's something that takes a lot of practice. It's something that you want to, make a priority to get good habits in, and those take time. So as we go about this, I would encourage everybody, if you have a pen and paper or anything to take notes on, I think it's a really good time to take some notes, because these are goals that you can make become habits. And then habits like wheelchair racing, they just become more and more, you're efficient at them, and it becomes something that's streamlined for your day. and then can lead to really, really nice results. So yeah, get ready for some notes, and we're gonna begin. Like Adam said, he's gonna have he'll be moderating. So as questions arise, definitely feel free to ask them. We have questions at the end as well, but I love questions, so don't feel like you can't ask anything. All right, we're gonna begin. So sports nutrition, like regular nutrition, it's about like what are you putting into your body. But when we're talking about sports nutrition, there are a few more sort of things to think about. For example, what are you going to have before a workout? What are you going to have after a workout? And what are you going to have throughout the day in order to make the most of the sports that you are pursuing? And it's similar to like regular nutrition and what you're eating throughout the day. But when we are really focused on wheelchair racing and being active in general, there are a few ways we can actually maximize what we eat to take even more advantage of the exercises that we're doing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what my philosophy around nutrition is throughout this presentation. And in order to make the most of this great sport that we have. Oh shoot, there's no animations, right? Okay, all right, well, so here is the why when it comes to sports nutrition. And as you can see on the slide, all of these are great things. There's fewer injuries. These are things I also like to point out because it's not necessarily just like, oh, I'm hungry, I'm gonna eat, so I'm not hungry anymore. There's a lot more going on with what you eat that definitely relates directly to how well you perform. So some of those, like I said, fewer injuries, getting stronger, getting faster, having better focus, being able to last longer and having more endurance, even improving your attitude, which absolutely impacts how well you're able to train that day and how well you're able to think about how you trained that day, etc. And something that's extremely relevant right now, being sick less often. So something that nutrition completely influences is your immune system. And so now, like always, thinking about your immune system is something that is a really key focus. We may not have a lot of events coming up in the near future, but today is an extremely important day to be thinking about your immune system and how you can be as healthy as possible and avoid getting sick. Okay, so for my next slide, this is sort of a way to illustrate what Adam mentioned earlier, that nutrition is what you're doing throughout the rest of the day. So not only are the foods you're eating acting as your fuel, like this race car image, I kind of like the little guys that are each having their own specific job to keep that car like running as smoothly as possible, because the foods you eat are also variable. Like they have different jobs, and yet they're all, the back wheels is as essential as the front wheel when you're thinking about being a fast sports car. So there's all kinds of things that we eat for specific reasons, and they help you perform the very best to your ability. And as I also kind of alluded to earlier, it's a process, and you can get better and better and better at it. 8 years down the road, I eat differently today than I did when I first arrived here. And I would have said that I was like, you know, pretty passionate about nutrition back in 2011. So it's something you continue to get better at. And I think it's something that it's a cool thing to think about in its different components. So we'll talk about what those components are, and you don't have to be overwhelmed by them at once, but thinking about them individually can really offer a lot of enhancements to your sports performance. Okay, so now we're going to go into the what's of what I would like to show you my philosophy about nutrition is. And that's really, if you've come to our camps before, you've probably seen this slide before. But it's honestly really helped me learn how to think about what I'm going to eat before and after practice. And it all completely is surrounded by the idea of recovery. And I asked, like on my slide, what do you think about when you hear the word recovery? And I like asking that because if you're out there and thinking about recovery, really, what are you kind of like going through in your minds when you think about recovery? And for me, what it often was is, what am I doing after working out? You know, you hear about it afterwards, and that's not completely wrong. But for me, what stood out the most for recovery was I recognized I needed to have it inside of me ahead of time in order to do the workout if I am, you know, recovering with that exact item. So definitely this is a way of approaching nutrition and all of your lifestyle habits where you think about them in relation to training before and after. That's really what I'm trying to say here. So what those 4 R's are, and this is a good place to maybe take some notes. There may or may not be a pop quiz at the end anyway, so not a bad idea to take notes, but the 4 R's are replenish, repair, reinforce, and rehydrate. And honestly, I think for me, after 8 years of being here, this has informed me a lot. And every day we know what our workouts are and they're going to be a little bit different. And then these 4 R's, while they stay the same, you can change them a little bit to work the best for whatever workout is going to be that day. So that's what I love about them. Okay, so first of all, the first R was replenish. And so what this is referring to is the major fuel that you're using for that workout. So for wheelchair racing, because that's why we're all here, if you are new or if you've been doing this for years, you may have realized that there are times during practice that you are sprinting. You know, you're starting from a stop and you're, you know, going off the start line, or you're starting on your rollers. If you're in a race, you are, you know, you're in a draft for a while, but then there's an attack and you are gonna try and stay with the people you are with, or you wanna make an attack. And so you're the one who's like jumping out of the draft and trying to sprint to the finish line. Or you're climbing up a hill and, you know, your heart rate, you can feel your heart rate increasing during those times. This chart over here, if you look at the bottom, the percentages refer to how hard you are working. And I would honestly say in our sport, you know, we're oftentimes in the 60 to 100% intensity. If we're not in a draft, you're working pretty maximally to keep your speed high. That is where this blue carbohydrate, so CHO, which stands for carbohydrate, it increases. That line shows that your body is using carbohydrates to go to those sorts of intensities. What happens if you don't have the carbohydrates there to fuel that is that blue line goes lower. It just means you're not going to be able to actually go as fast or for as long as you would like to go if you don't have that right kind of fuel. Our body is not really able to switch its fuel source and go the same intensity. It will just bring that intensity down. On the contrary, like for this graph as well, as the intensity is lower, you are using more fat to move. I just like to point out that in wheelchair racing, a lot of the important fuel sources, because we do have a lot of intermittent sprints in our sport, those are only going to be able to fuel us with carbohydrates. So when you're thinking of replenish, I like to really instill in your mind that carbohydrates are what need to be going back into your body because you use a lot of them during your workouts. And as I just mentioned, that means they needed to be there ahead of time too. So that's kind of before practice, carbohydrates are going to be your friend. Making sure you have carbohydrates. I'll go into what examples of carbohydrates, like what food sources they are in the next slide. But really, replenishing, you want to have carbohydrates there ahead of time, and you want to put them back in afterwards. Additionally, What we do know about muscles and muscle cells is when you start exercising, there are receptors on your muscle cells that allow carbohydrates to come into them. And those cells actually move, or those receptors move to the outside of the cell as soon as you start exercising. And they stay there for about 30 minutes afterwards. So the reason you might have heard eat within 30 minutes, for carbohydrates, that's actually very important because those receptors that allow the carbohydrates, they're kind of like a door to get into your muscles, they're open. They're like open and willing to let carbohydrates in for about 30 minutes after the exercising. So if you eat within that time, then you actually are able to recover more efficiently and effectively for the next day and if you have a next workout. And that's another way to make sure you have enough carbohydrates ahead of time. So if that makes sense, hope you're with me. If it doesn't, please ask questions at the end for sure. But that's a little spiel about why we need carbohydrates and when to have them. And here are some examples of carbohydrates. So they are going to be breads, cereals, milk, yogurt, soy milk even, fruit, Gatorade's a good one, pasta, potatoes, rice, and beans. You might want to take a little bit of extra note to, I made some of these like this like brownish red color. That's the milk, the soy milk, yogurt, rice and beans. You'll see why in a minute, but these are all really good sources of carbohydrates. And these are, again, things you can have before the workout and things you can have after the workout to be able to get to those high intensity climbing or getting off the start block or making an attack on a draft or even sprinting to the finish line. So anytime you feel like you're working hard, that's carbohydrates working for you. Okay, so my next R is repair. And this word, as I'm sure sounds pretty familiar to you, you're repairing something, you're fixing it. This is referring to muscles. And muscle cell and muscle tissue, it's constantly growing, constantly remodeling and renewing, and therefore it needs some supplies at all times to allow that to happen. And we as athletes, we kind of stretch that to its limits. We're making those muscles as big as we possibly can or as efficient as we possibly can. We're working on endurance. That's all coming from our nice muscle tank that we have, which means we need to help it out and give it the supplies that it's always using. So, and this is the job of protein. I'm sure you've heard the word protein, but what it actually is, it's something that our muscles are made out of. And actually, your immune system is also made of proteins. So it's something that is constantly being used in your body and needs to be added in or eaten, another way to say that, regularly. So some examples of protein are going to be fish, meat, tofu, cheese, beans, nuts, eggs, milk, yogurt, soy milk, chicken, whole grains. And as you can see, so I made some of these words also be that kind of like brownish weird color that I made in the last slide. I like to show this because if you remember, some of the carbohydrates from the last slide are also on this protein page. And I think that's important because, as I mentioned, we need carbohydrates to do everything, right? And as I just talked about, we're using protein all day long. We definitely need protein as well. What's nice as an athlete, and sometimes as a para-athlete, when you're trying to bring your portions down a little bit, maybe you can't eat as much, maybe you're smaller, or you're gonna be in your racing chair in a few hours, so you wanna try to eat, kind of get the most bang for your buck, if you will. Some of these carbohydrate foods also are sources of protein. And I think it's nice to know that you can kind of hit two things with one stone when it comes to nutrition. And I think that's been helpful for me. It's also nice for the convenience. Say you're driving out to the track where you train, or maybe not now, or you're driving somewhere or going somewhere. It's nice to have something that's like one food there ready that's got your protein and your carbs, because those are both essential. And some foods can offer both of those. So just wanted to throw out the 2-in-1 foods there. Okay. Oh yeah, additionally, carbohydrate needs are a little bit more variable based on what workouts you're doing, what your body's like, you know, how much function you have throughout your body. But what we do know about protein is that it's a little more known how much you actually need. So 20 grams of protein per meal is actually, for most people, what is a good target to aim for. Some people can go up to like 25, maybe 30, but really you don't get much more than 20. You don't use much more than 25 grams, regardless of your body type. So I like to have this slide here because it's a good amount goal for us all to kind of strive for. If you're not used to this yet, taking a look at nutrition labels can show you how many grams of protein are in what you're having. And I think as you come from this presentation, you know, if you're not used to looking at the food you eat, spend a few days of actually like, okay, what did I eat today? And then look at the labels and write down how many grams of protein and how many grams of carbohydrate and how many grams of fat you had that day, just to kind of get familiar with what's in there. And then after that, make sure you had about 20 grams of protein in those meals. If you didn't, then, you know, doing the same thing, kind of like mixing and matching to add foods together to get enough protein. Some examples that can give you 20 grams could be yogurt with whole grain cereal and nuts, peanut butter sandwich with a glass of milk, a couple eggs on a piece of toast or 2 pieces of toast. All of those can get you about 20 grams per meal. It's not a very huge amount, but it's a good amount to shoot for because we want to give our muscles all of the supplies they can possibly handle to make us really fast wheelchair racers, to keep our immune system healthy, and at the end of the day, to make these goals. Okay. Oh yeah. These are others, but if you have questions about others, or like I said, I think researching what foods have protein is a fun idea during the summer that we have. It's a very different summer than usual. And just, you know, being adventurous and finding some foods that you maybe haven't tried before, but are willing to try now.
Hey, Suze, we have one question. Maria asked, can whey be used as a substitute for protein foods?
Okay, that's a great question. Yes. At the end of the day, whey is a great source of protein. It's a complete protein. It's also kind of nice in that if you are trying to eat a smaller portion, you can get 20 grams of protein from whey in a fluid or in whatever you like stir it into that's going to be really used by your muscles. Yeah, so definitely. One thing I would say, and I'll talk about supplements in a little bit. The only caution I have towards only using whey or to relying on whey is that there are other micronutrients that are present in whole foods. So like, for example, whey is found in dairy products. Say you were to have a yogurt, a Greek yogurt, to get those 20 grams of whey, you might actually get a lot more vitamins, minerals, and healthy fats from that Greek yogurt that you lose when you take an isolated whey product. So when you're thinking about overall nutrition health, everything's important. But when you really need to get 20 grams of protein in, you know, it's just like a few times a week that you're having to do this. Whey is an easy, very nutritional way to get protein. Does that answer your question?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
So why don't you go on? There's a couple more questions, but I think you will probably answer them as you go through.
Okay.
So why don't you carry on, and then I'll interject as
Sounds good. That was a great question. Thanks for asking. Okay. So the third R is reinforce, and this, as it sounds like, this is your support of your everything. We're reinforcing this body that Adam's teaching you how to get as streamlined and efficient and economical and fast as possible. Our nutrition is going to reinforce every piece of that. And as as much as carbohydrates and whey and whey as well as other protein gets you faster and stronger, there are things like vitamins and minerals that actually reinforce all of those processes. So we're not just made of muscle, right? We are also human beings that we are susceptible to getting sick. We're susceptible to getting injuries, susceptible to, you know, having some like psychological issues, all of those things that come with being a complex organism. But we also know that there are certain things that our bodies use to just help our immune system and help our mind to avoid falling victims to things like that. So I like to use reinforce is what the USOC uses, and I like that word a lot. It just shows that you're supporting all of this process of you being an athlete while you're also a human. And so vitamins and minerals, not only are they found in colorful foods that I have like listed here, but it's also sort of a lifestyle. You know, you're reinforcing your entire personality, your body. Sleeping is just as critical as nutrition is to keeping your body healthy, and it might even be more, honestly. Something I've also learned throughout the years is just how important of a piece sleep is to be an athlete. And so I can't even emphasize enough how much of a reinforcement sleep is to, you know, your ability to be a wheelchair racer, your ability to be a human. And like all these colorful foods that have vitamins and minerals in them, your sleep is really, it's like allowing your body to use or to be able to exercise. It's allowing your body to be able to grow. Without vitamins and minerals and without sleep, and really without carbohydrates and protein as well, your body, as smart as it is not going to let you grow as much as it could if they're not there. We're very much a protective species, and so when you don't have what you need, your body knows it, and it won't let you go to that intensity that you would like to go, and it won't let you get the muscles that you would like to get and all of these things if these things are lacking. So really reinforcing your entire system's ability to make the most of nutrition and to make the most of wheelchair racing, and whatever else your goals are in life is important. So yes, also your immune system. Like all of these things are dependent on having adequate amounts of nutrition, sleep, and yeah, can't emphasize it enough. Okay, so when it comes to rehydrating, I know this is a question I think a lot of people have. In general, the USOC recommends having about 3 cups of water per every pound of water that you were to lose during training. Not very many of us weigh ourselves, you know, like before and after practice. If you are concerned, it's a good idea to weigh yourself before and after practice, and then you can see how much fluid you may have sweated out. That could guide you for that 3-cup rule. However, in general, I think it's important to drink throughout the day. If you're ever thirsty, you've gone too long without drinking probably, or it might mean that, hey, you could benefit from having water in a Camelback during practice, like me. If you're still thirsty during practices and afterwards, it might mean that, hey, having like some electrolytes in that fluid actually is a good idea for you. What the electrolytes do is they help you to retain fluid. So some people are heavy sweaters. You might need some electrolytes to help you keep that hydration in longer so you can make it through a long, hot practice in the summer, or in the roller room. Sometimes that gets really hot too. It's trial and error, but in general, if you're feeling thirsty, backtrack and say, okay, tomorrow I need to make sure I drink more in the beginning of that day so that I could avoid already being a little bit too dehydrated and, you know, feeling thirsty. Also, I didn't put this on this slide, but I would like to make a note of it now. I think we've just gotten recent research that came out showing that there are ways to remain cool when you're training for para athletes, which is, I think, a huge thing for us. I think one of the major priorities of looking at cooling strategies for athletes is you can extend how long you can go hard when you keep your core temperature down a little bit. And so I think it's cool that they show that, you know, having ice chips in water, or having ice water, or maybe even using an ice vest or something really cold around your neck. Say you're training inside and you can just like keep putting on a new ice pack, things like that. They actually help us as para athletes who may have difficulty removing body heat below our injury level to stay cooler, which then at the end of the day means you could have maybe trained a little bit harder for longer. So what I would like to say here is if you're someone that gets really hot during practice, maybe try having some ice water in your workouts. Maybe try using an ice vest. If you're a heavy sweater, maybe try using some electrolytes or a sports drink during practice and see if that improves how you're able to tolerate the workout. So, I'd say. Okay, this is sort of like creating a meal with all 4 R's. And I like the smoothie, it's Tatiana's, that just because it really does meet all of these. And she's been sort of successful, so it seems to be an okay example here. But having something with Greek yogurt. So if you remember, yogurt was a carbohydrate and a protein. So you've got repairing and replenishing with that. You can also get up to 20 grams with Greek yogurt, which is pretty nice. Not all foods can get you there in such a carbohydrate friendly way. Having some spinach in there, some blueberries, and some coconut water. Coconut water, I have it here because it has some electrolytes in it. So you can use regular water, but if you are somebody that maybe sweating a ton, having some coconut water in there can help you. Yeah, so this is just sort of an example of what you could have after practice, after a race, that would help you to rehydrate. Or, I mean, to recover. Yeah. Okay. So, here we go. Talking a little bit about supplements. I just love this image because, like, you know, Bugs Bunny, if you've seen Space Jam, Bugs really thought that the Mike's secret stuff was going to help all the team realize that they were, you know, bigger and better than they were before. And at the end of the day, it really was water that they had it within them the entire time. And I think supplements, for the most part, is similar. When you're thinking about supplements, it's something you want to talk to a sports dietitian about, to be honest. At the most, your foods and your fluids can give you everything that you need to be as prepared to be the best wheelchair racer on the planet. There are certain times though, like say you get a blood test and you might be low in iron or you may be low in vitamin D. Those are the 2 big ones that we test for because a lot of athletes actually are low in those. And when you know that you're clinically low, so like a doctor actually tells you, that's where, you know, having a supplement that's been approved by a third party, which is like, for example, NSF approves, is there a third party that approves supplements to say like, hey, that's actually what's in there. That's a time to have a supplement. But otherwise, unless, it's really not a great idea, to be honest. Like whey protein, as long as you're getting it from an NSF certified brand, it's okay. Say you need something very conveniently. But when you can get that same thing from yogurt, and you're going to have the other food matrix components that are in the yogurt, like the vitamin D, the calcium. There's other things going on in whole foods that we still aren't even completely aware of that help them to just help your body use them even more so than supplements. I think it's better to steer away from supplements. It's also a lot cheaper to steer away from them. There are times that it's okay, like if you're clinically deficient in a vitamin that's important, that's a time, but for the most part, I think getting from whole foods is what I would recommend to everyone. And that's what I do with myself. I would say I do take an iron and a vitamin D supplement, but I am low in those. Um, Otherwise, using whole foods is most cost-effective way and healthiest way and safest way to get the amount of nutrition that you need. Okay, so I have this slide up here. So this is what the USOPC uses just to show what an easy training or weight management type of plate would look like. So say your day off, or if you have light workouts that day, this is a pretty nice way to think about building a plate. And this could be every plate you're having that day. So you want to have colorful things that make up about half of it. You want to have some good quality protein sources on there, and some carbohydrates on there, because those are all going to help you recover from the week's training. They're going to help you be ready for the next trainings that are coming up. And they're also providing you all of those really important vitamins and minerals. And every single one of those pit crew that was working on the race car at the beginning of this are illustrated on this picture. And they're each doing a different job, but they're all very important. There's also water up there. Or whatever kind of fluid you would like. Definitely you want to have water throughout the day, but other beverages are also fine. Let's see here. Yeah, if you have questions about this, let me know. 1 to 3 teaspoons is also sort of what's recommended for fats. Fat is not a bad thing, it's a good thing. I just haven't mentioned it specifically because most of the time the whole foods you're eating will help you, they'll be attached to some good quality fats as well. So just try to think about having real food. You'll probably get all the fat that you need. So, okay. This is my challenge for you. Hopefully you took notes. I'm a big note taker, but I really, really recommend writing down 3 ways based on this presentation that you can change your current diet for the better. So be specific and be realistic. This could even be I would like to, grocery shop for this ingredient. It doesn't have to be even super elaborate, but it could be a good starting point for making sure you have the right foods on hand to become a healthier eater and to make all of your wheelchair racing goals. Then I think it's also helpful to rank them in order of easiest to hardest. So, and then give yourself a month to reach each of those goals. Okay. So like I said, I just want to get your brain started working, and hopefully I haven't put you to sleep yet. But this one I get a lot that is more difficult than I realized at first. But if you're looking at this list, can you pick out the carbohydrate? Because I know I've said carbohydrates are important a lot, but not everyone knows actually what that means. Oh, yes. Wait, is anyone? Okay, has anyone voted? Okay. So can you guys see this pop quiz? Didn't want to just stop. Okay, cool. Okay, nice. Yeah, thanks for answering, guys. You guys are doing great. Only 12 of the 46 have voted, so keep voting. You guys are doing great. And then they can just switch from. That's awesome. Thank you. Killing it.
Hey, Suze.
Yeah,
Um,
I was just gonna say.
hey, yeah, why don't we, if you don't mind, we have a bunch of questions and I want to try to get to each of those.
Yeah,
And we
and
have
that was
about
the
20
end of my
minutes left.
presentation.
Okay, great. So I think 20 minutes, hopefully we can get through all 8 of these questions. So if you're ready, if you want to, you can finish with the poll and talk through that for a minute, but then let's jump into those questions so we can get those taken care of.
Okay, no, that's perfect. Let's go through these questions. Okay, so
Okay. So I will, so Peyton wants to know how many times should he eat per day, and then how big each of those meals should be. So as best, I know it depends, of course, but just give them, the macro.
yeah, thanks, Peyton. Great question. So one thing, thinking about 20 grams of protein is a good way to kind of build your meal. You want to have about 20 grams in each of those meals. And from there, having like 2 pieces of colorful fruit would be a good way to getting enough carbohydrates in. And honestly, that's a good way to decide how big your meal should be. So making sure you're getting 20 grams of protein and then 2 colorful things in there, something to drink to rehydrate. That's probably, and then some grains. So like some, whole grains, or there's examples throughout this presentation of ways to build a meal. Yeah, that's probably the best way to guide it. They're gonna become a little bit different, but in general, if you want my opinion, yeah.
Yep.
And then
great.
about
Cool. Awesome.
every 3 to 4 hours.
Okay.
Eating a meal.
Great. Okay. Awesome. Good. That sounds great. Okay. Next question. Joshua wants to know. This is a good question. If you're taking carbohydrate pre-training, how long prior to that training session would you ingest carbohydrate?
Excellent. So with carbohydrates, most like simple carbohydrates, that's like fruit or fruit juice. That's something you can have within an hour. So up to when you're about to get in your chair, things like sugar, you could have anywhere within an hour and closer to getting in your chair, you can have carbs. If you're gonna have something more complex, so like whole grains, I would say more than an hour. But things like fruit, you could have within 1 hour of training.
Great. Okay, I'm going to bounce around a little bit because I think you did answer a few of these questions after they were asked. So let's. Here's a question about. Yes, if we have athletes have latex allergies and someone who is allergic to avocado, banana, what would be a good alternative?
Great question. So if you are able to have things like walnuts or chia seeds and fish like salmon, that's a good way to get those high quality food or fats that you're not getting in avocado. And then honestly, potatoes or any nice fruit, you'll probably meet your potassium goals. So you don't have to have bananas to get there.
Great.
I hope that answers your question quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see, there were a couple supplements questions. I think you addressed those. So we prioritize whole food as a means of in terms of nutritional value, as you said, the most bang for the buck. And you know exactly what you're ingesting too. Vance wants to know about carbonation in water. If there's, you have a position on whether it's good or bad. So just no sugar involved, just carbonation.
Yep. I would say, honestly, I think it's decent. You have to be aware that you might feel fuller without getting quite as much hydration from it, which that could become a problem. But if it helps you drink water, I don't think there's a lot of bad things about it. There's a thought that it might, sort of like artificial sweeteners, it might trick your body a little bit to thinking you're having something like soda. You could then have an insulin response, and then you could become insensitive to insulin. I think we're a long way from proving that, but I don't think they're terrible. I don't think they should be your only form of fluid.
Great. Okay, here's Melanie has a question about a vegetarian diet. So you may need to take, I don't know how simple this one is to answer, but But I think that's a key question, because we certainly have athletes on our team who are vegetarian, and so there's some deficiencies perhaps in protein intake and iron intake. So okay, so talk a little bit about that vegetarian diet.
Yeah, fantastic. I think if you use a vegetarian diet, I think really focusing on whole grains, focusing on legumes, so beans and lentils, peanuts, those are all really important elements to your diet, because they're going to give you some of the most amounts of amino acids, which are your proteins, and those are not going to be as like highly available as they would be in an animal product. So it's totally doable. I just think make sure you're prioritizing whole grains, beans, peanuts, and I definitely think if you're going to be a vegetarian, having a blood test and checking out what your iron level is to make sure you're getting enough. It could be that you might benefit from an NSF certified iron supplement, but not everyone does. So I think that's a good question. Hopefully that answered it quickly. I think that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, no, I think so too. Okay, Kelly is asking, can you talk about how to know what your body needs if you bonk after a race? So, which I'm sure you all know what that means and feels like when you feel like you have a 800-pound gorilla that jumps on your back the last bit of a marathon, or any also on the track. So so I think I would interpret this to be, I think you can talk two things. Why, Sue's like, one, why does that happen? And just you touch briefly on why you have that sensation and why you experience that. And then two, how can you avoid that from a nutritional standpoint, and then what you can do post-race if that happens.
Yeah, great question. So what's happening there is, like I said, your muscles, like they have doors to let carbohydrates in so that they can work. But once those carbohydrates that are in there are used up, which happens fairly quickly with the stuff that's stored in your muscle, it then comes from the rest of your body. So your liver is going to start trying to send carbohydrates to the muscles to help you get it there. And eventually that could even be used up. And then your body is in a state where, like I was showing at the beginning, you want to get to that 80%, 100%, you're at the end of a race, but you can't. You don't actually have the materials there. Like you don't have the carbohydrates that can keep you there available. So you have to bring that intensity down. That's similar to a bonk. So, and it doesn't always mean you did something wrong. Like it can be a great race that you worked so hard, you used everything, but there are ways to sort of delay that. So one thing I mentioned in that 30-minute period after working out, when you add carbohydrates there, it helps your muscles to store carbohydrates there for later. Also, having carbohydrates in every meal throughout the day is going to help your liver then be able to provide carbohydrates throughout these long races and throughout 2-a-day workouts. And then if you're still feeling that bonk, there's also a great call for, say you're a marathoner, having some carbohydrates in your Camelback. So like I use a sports drink when I race, and during workouts sometimes that has carbohydrates in it. So it's like a powdered mix that I'm drinking. That's a way to then have your stomach take over from the liver and provide your muscles those same carbohydrates that they're wanting. So that's how I would recommend getting over that bonk. It's really your muscles. It takes them a long time to break down fat to use as energy. So you're wanting to go fast, they're wanting to go fast, but they just can't get there fast enough. That's what the carbohydrates are really helpful for.
That's great. That's great. Okay. Olivia asks about, and you addressed, I think, very well, what do you look for in terms of recovery foods and fluids and so on? Okay, but I think she just wants to know what you personally, Susannah, like to eat. So we had a nice hard 20-mile push this morning. So what would you ingest post-workout this morning for that type of a 90-plus minute session?
Well, what I had was some Greek yogurt. I like Faya yogurt because it's like 2% Greek yogurt, and added blueberries to that. So I got carbohydrates both from the dairy that was in that yogurt and the blueberries. And I got protein from the yogurt. Had that right after, took a shower, and then like kind of died on my bed for like 20 minutes because it was a hard workout. And then I had a wrap that had turkey, spinach, and some cheese in it. I made sure I got those carbohydrates right after the workout because we're gonna have another hard workout tomorrow morning. But I had another meal about an hour and a half later because you want to replenish from the 20 miler we did, and then continue throughout the day to make sure you're getting enough food, having enough to repair, and being ready for the rest of the week's workouts.
And I think that's a key point. That was a mantra that Liz Broad, I heard from her constantly, was eat and repeat, eat, repeat, repeat. So it's not just what you do 30 minutes post, but it's throughout the day, and that will best position you for the next training session.
Exactly. And it kind of helps you also find a lifestyle habit where you're not overeating ever, because you're going to eat again in like a couple of hours, 2 to 3 hours. So you're able to restrain, and then also make sure your body like can digest food, that kind of smallish amount, so that it can use it all. You're not having excess stuff ever.
Right. Okay. We just have about 8 minutes, so we'll try to get through the rest.
Okay.
Anonymous attendee wants to know, on days you don't exercise, what should you eat to still build muscle? And I'm gonna change that question. Hopefully we'll address the question, but can you talk briefly about how your nutritional strategy each day changes based on what you're doing? So a full recovery day versus a high intensity day versus an active recovery day?
Yeah. So first I'll say how they don't change. First of all, I eat as soon as I get up every single day, no matter what. And I think it's helpful to be in that habit where you're providing your body food from the second, or not the second, but like as soon as you get up. You're not just waiting several hours till you eat. That's a good habit. Then the ways it does change is, I probably, well, you're taking out that pre-workout meal. So I would say I have more like 3 meals and 1 snack on a non-workout day. One of those was like immediately after I got up. 1 or 2 snacks. It honestly doesn't change a lot. I would say the major difference is when I'm training during the day, I'm going to have like a pretty carbohydrate centric pre-exercise meal. And then I'm not necessarily having that on my days off. I'm just having a meal that's like built around that 20 grams of protein, a couple colorful things, and some fluids. So it's really that high carbohydrate pre-exercise meals that I'm not having on non-training days as much.
Great. So you touched on this. So you can just touch on it real quickly, but if the question is, if you're competing in an early morning race, let's say for instance a marathon, which oftentimes is a 7 a.m. ish, so a very early start. So what type of strategy do you encourage or use before a race such as that? And it may not be a marathon, but we'll just say that generally that's an early morning races tend to be those road races and road events.
Excellent. So I'm assuming that if you're going to race in a marathon, that you're also training for the marathon. And so some of your workouts will include some longer stuff. So I think a good strategy for me is that I practice my strategies while I train. So I'm the kind of person that gets up a couple hours, 2 to 3 hours before practice. And so that I can have enough time for my more complex carbohydrates to digest. So I think it's a bit of a trial and error though. If you're the kind of person that really struggles getting up early, I do think it takes a lot of practice, but if you still are, I think those are the times, like there have been times like where I overslept for a race though, and that's where I had just like a gel. So I had like Cliff Bar makes gels, and I had a couple of those before the race instead of my normal like bagel, peanut butter and honey meal that I would have had like maybe 3 hours before a marathon or usually often during practice. So if you really do struggle, having a nice simple carbohydrate before your race, so something like a gel or applesauce, it's something like, I say it's trial and error because if you find out you're bonking halfway through a marathon, it probably means you need to practice eating more frequently or eating maybe a little bit more before that race. So like making sure you're better and better at getting up earlier. That could be a strategy. But if you really struggle with that, having something like a gel and then really putting carbohydrates in your Camelback so that during the race itself, you've got some extra fuel there that you missed out on maybe by having a bigger breakfast. I hope that answered the question.
Great. That definitely did. I got to thank you. So that means yes.
Okay.
Okay. So we have just a couple minutes. So Peyton wants to know someone who's dairy intolerant, if there are any substitutions for someone in that position.
Okay, great question. I would say for me, I think that soy is, if you're thinking about dairy alternatives, soy is the best one. I want everyone to know that I do not believe almond milk is a source of protein. It's a great source of fluid and carbohydrate. I don't see anything wrong with it. It's just like when it comes to milks and you want to get actually high quality protein like you would from milk, from dairy milk, having soy milk is really good. Otherwise, any other kind of animal product that's a protein, eggs, nuts, beans, grains, those are all great sources of protein. It doesn't have to come from dairy in any way. Just make sure you're having carbohydrates or something fruit with it, because dairy, one nice thing about it is it's a good source of carbohydrates as well.
Awesome. Okay, let's see. Does the U of I team have a full-time nutritionist? We don't. Susannah acts as our boots on the ground, and then we coordinate with the nutritionist from the USOPC. So we're really fortunate. We're really fortunate.
Yes.
Okay. This one is from Ramiro, just wondering about doesn't consume glutamine, and I think the question is, can you get that in fruit? Can fruit substitute for glutamine?
Honestly, having a wide range of protein, like of whole food proteins, will make sure you're getting enough glutamine. So I wouldn't necessarily say fruit, but having any sort of variation in your diet, whole foods, gonna make sure you've got plenty of glutamine. There's no problem there.
Okay, great. One last question about L-tyrosine. Cheese is a good source. I know that, so I'll answer that.
Yeah, Adam can answer it.
And then we have no more questions. Great. So, and we are just running on the edge of time here, and I think we timed it perfectly. So, do you want to say thank you to Susannah for your time and sharing a little bit of your expertise with us today? And as well, thanks for all the attendees and your incredible questions and for tuning in. I put this in the answer. All these presentations, PowerPoints will be posted on our website, and I posted a link. We'll continue to push that out so you know where those are. My Monday presentation is up there. A link to that PowerPoint is up there as well. And then next week, we will have all these presentations up on YouTube. So we'll ensure that you guys know how to get to those sources, so you can watch it again if you'd like to, and if there's anything you missed, you can jump back in and find that. So, so again, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to tomorrow. We'll be in the weight room in the morning for our workout, and then we have the honor of Scott Hollenbeck will be joining us, which will be fun. It'll be a blast to listen to him run through. He's a great tactician and a great storyteller. So we'll have some good yarns for sure, and we'll look forward to that. So so thank you, and we will talk to everybody soon. Appreciate it.